Episode 8, Stone Names. Dawn smells like wet earth and the inside of a workshop. The block we dragged from the maintenance yard sits on trestles in the quad, damp canvas thrown back like a bandage. Elder Doob arrives with 2 cutters from town. Steady hands, small tools, not sculptors, lettermen. One is a woman with wrists like chisels and a laugh she's not here to use. They test the face, chalk the lines, and wait for the words that will go into rock and not come out. Khumalo reads the river's text once, slow enough for Stone to learn. He carried, we eat our part now. We will not prove love by opening. Sunmaster Zulu designate, council lied, school corrected, we not laid. No song 50 days. Witness small, sun lass, not a mouth. No singing, no ululation, plain voice only. The cutters nod. They mark the lines with charcoal and begin. The tap-tap is gentle as rain. Dust gathers in the letters like history finding its shape. Around them, we make boring into a ceremony. Doors chalked, not a mouth. Gate hinges given a coin of milk. Drones up but well back, streamers slack. Bell straps tied to wrists only. No ankles, no ideas. Students stand along the quad like fence posts that learn to breathe. Naledi hands chalk to first years and has them draw the phrase on the nearest drain so even water can read. Dube watches the cutter's hand etch council lied. School corrected. He doesn't flinch when it lands. I'll read that line out loud later, he says to no one in particular. We don't thank him. We nod like people watching a beam seat in a wall. Aimed. By 10, the first 2 lines are cut to the depth of a promise. By noon, Sunmaster Zulu designate is carved crisp enough to shame rumor. During rest, Sifo dampens the stone face so the letters drink and settle. Boosie brushes grit away with a painter's soft broom, as if the dust were a child who tried to sit at the wrong table. Thandi keeps a low flat under the quad like a tablecloth hand. In Keletso mans the bell wrist's crate with a purple shadow still faint on his thumb. When a younger boy asks if the no-song rule includes humming, he points at the stone and says, "The river asked for silence. We give it receipts." The boy mouths the litany once, small and exact, and puts his hum back in his pocket. The ledger writes on its own in the bright room. Stone underway, letters accept, Doob present. It is the voice of a clerk who finally got a budget. We keep the wall painted boring. Lime stripe checked, cabinet braced. The we not lies along the flag run under its cast of white like an obedient muscle. Every anchor gets bruised again. Flag cleat, north rail, east stairhead, chapel ramp lip, gate hinge, residence B grate, bright room skirting. The ridge remembers to keep its weather to itself. Just after lunch, the tamper paint on the admin pull screws shows a perfect crescent knocked aside and smeared back like lipstick on a guilty mouth. The right index print is there too. Tiny gleam of glue in the whirl. We follow the purple to the shade of the music block. Lerato Maseko stands at the sink with her right index finger under the tap, and her mouth set for war. Moon Prefect, neat as a law, the kind of person who alphabetizes apologies. She stares at the stain that won't lift, and then at us like we've embarrassed her on purpose. I didn't want danger, she says. I wanted precision. The house hums at 402. It wants tuning. If we gave it exact chords the way Jonas drew, the building would learn to hold its breath on cue without these. She waves at chalk and lime. Barnyard tricks. Rooms don't get to be instruments, Thandi says quiet. They get to be rooms. You can love precision and still be useful. We don't do a raid. We do a ring. Smoke low, flat under eaves. I warn my mouth and keep it cheap. Kwanda sets a mug by the nearest pull. Patient as law. Boosie snips the chickweed of fishing line we find under the cover lip. Ping, mug eats its sulk. Lerato doesn't flinch. She's embarrassed, not afraid. Outcomes, receipts, no theater, workshop chores for 50 days. Door lips, drain grids, poster templates, No adhesives unsupervised. Room ethics with Nandi. Bell wrists marshaled during assemblies. A written apology to policy, not people, posted on the board where we pin receipts. She nods once, lipstick steady, dignity bruised but standing. That's as much drama as we allow. Yeah. By mid-afternoon, the stone is ready to hear us say its name. The cutters brush slurry from the grooves and wedge the block upright on the trolley with straps and stubbornness. We trundle it down to the spillway in a quiet line. Students carry the trestles. Staff carry the milk. Doobie carries nothing but his mouth. That's what he's paying with today. The apron is already chalked. Double ring ugly. Not a mouth across the lip where water dreams of teeth. Iron bowl upside down at north. Ground line clipped. Milk coins at the hinges. We put the stone inside the outer ring facing the campus and let its weight settle the way a sentence settles when it is true. We ask to speak. The surface lifts into skin. No face, just a page. Khumalo reads the stone text out loud, line by line, so water can hear what rock has learned. No singing, no music. Each word lands like a nail where wood wants it. Doobie steps to his chair and sits. He speaks the correction we made him practice on the quad in the morning, voice steady enough that a house could live in it. I wrote the phrase "no lasting imprint" to pass a vote that was already moving. I believed rotation. I believed off campus by winter. I used the phrase as a bridge and then called the song Corruption when the rail sang. I lied to govern fear. Sunmaster Zulu carried because I asked him to. We let him carry alone. I rescind the phrase. I accept this stone. I will write it and sign it again in town. The river writes receipt and then good. It adds one brief line. Count 50 aloud. We do, together, 1 to 50, plain, steady, bells on wrists silent. Thandi keeping flat under our breath. Numbers teach rooms what song will not, that we know how to finish. Boosie bruises the ring with lime again. Sipho smooths the milk edge. I keep my jaw cheap. Kwanda opens his palm near the we not, last not first, so iron keeps learning who we are now. The drones bob once, streamer calm. Hey, we haul the stone back up the slope and seat it in the quad against the admin wall where every child must read it to fetch a timetable. Naidu drills anchors through the base into a bed of mortar while Jonas, rope scar purple still faint, holds the panel board to shade the cutter's eyes. Larato prints ear, not string neatly on the inside of the music block case and tapes the 50-day notice beneath, then takes a brush and paints not a mouth on the hose cupboard herself. People watch her do it. She watches herself doing it. That's how change sticks. The ledger writes, stone placed, river satisfied, count begun D49. It adds, small witness, save jaw for echo contact. We prepare the safe echo, not an opening, not a seance. An ink-only look where a hand once pressed hard. Bright room set as if for surgery. Bowl grounded, lime stripe clean, cabinet shut and braced, panel quiet, drones parked outside, ring chalked ugly and close to the table. The we not stays upstairs along the flag run. Today it is enough to know it exists. Khumalo sets the rules in the air. Echo only. If pressure reaches, flat. If voice tries a name, sun last, and no from all of us. Witness, ink only, 2 counts, stop early. The page we bring isn't drama. It's the work order with designate printed under a name the town turned into rumor. On top of it, the rescission Duba signed this morning, the one that says the phrase was cover, not truth. I take my mark. The iron is cool under the cloth. My jaw is a budget I'm learning to keep. Outside, ink only, 2, I warn, so my mouth knows who pays if it overspends. The room is paint and patience. Thandi holds flat until even the insects fold their wings. Sipho barely cracks the smoke tin. Boosie keeps chalk ready. Kwanda sets his hand open a breath from the table edge. Mug posture without pride. I pull a thin picture from the ink and nothing else. No air, no skin, no room. 1, 2, stop. Pressure scars bloom, loops where a hand pressed, the tail of a Z that knows it is a Zulu only by careful hands. A long stroke that might be a memory, might be habit. No voice, just the shape of labor left on paper. A breath alters the lime under the cabinet. Not opening, remembering. The bowl hums through the ground line like a fridge at midnight. The sun crack along Kwanda's radius threads once, then rests. We wait. If you give Echo a place, it behaves like a guest. The table cools another degree. The ink on the rescission page shines at the loops where Duba signed and didn't flinch. I say the only sentence that belongs in any room where ghosts want favors. We will not prove love by opening. The Echo respects policy. It settles back into paper and callus. Kwanda's mouth doesn't tremble, but his hand does a small thing I've never seen it do. It eases, as if one muscle he's held for a decade has decided to retire. He doesn't spend a second touch. He doesn't look at me. He looks at the loop of a letter that is only a letter if you use your hands for work. Copy, he says to the air, as if a man he owes can hear him. Copy received. In, we log the Echo as operational. No voices, no call, scars only. The ledger writes, Echo observed. No openings, sun last, witness small. It adds one word it hasn't used for us before. Kind. Eat. Evening makes little debts we pay without being asked. Yard crumbs at the fence for the tokoloshe. Hinge milk at the chapel door. Chalk renewed on the ramp cap. Tamper paint checked. Streamer roots set for the night loop. The stone dries to its new color. Darker in grooves, honest on the face. We gather in the quad not for spectacle, but to stand in front of something we built that refuses to make noise. Khumalo says the litany once. We say it back, plain. He carried. We eat our part now. We will not prove love by opening. There's a hush that isn't fear. It's a building finally choosing to be a building. On the way to my doorway, I pass the stone and touch the margin where no letters live. It is cool and ordinary. A first year traces not a mouth on the hose cupboard and grins without apology. Jonas sweeps grit. Lerato tapes the last poster straight and steps back to check her own line. It is perfect. Kwanda stops in my frame and sets his palm on the wood once, the one touch the day allows. His sleeve smells of lime and hinge milk. The new hairline in his sun crack keeps its peace. Tomorrow we count 49, he says. And every day after until the river says stop, I say. We will not sing, he says. We will speak, I say. Rule holds, he says. Rule holds, I answer. We sleep facing the hall. Drones blink green, milk dries white, chalk dust settles. The stone does what stones are for, remembers what mouths forget. And somewhere behind paint, an echo sits where we put it and learns, finally, to rest. The stone held its new color through sunset, grooves darker like fresh rain in furrows. The quad felt taller for having something honest in it. Students drifted past in ones and twos to run their fingers along the unlettered margin and then step away as if the block had breathed. No singing leaked from anywhere. When someone forgot and hummed 2 notes, a friend tapped their bell strap, and the hum folded itself obediently. In the bright room we set our nights, bowl-grounded, lime-stripe checked, cabinet braced, then walked the anchors sunwise. At the chapel ramp lip a first year paused, whispered the litany into his sleeve, and kept going. At the flag cleat, filings dusted and lay still. The wee-knot didn't ask for attention. It behaved like rope that had learned its job. Sleep came late. The ledger wrote one more line and turned its own page. Count D49. Echo sleeps. That should have been enough. It wasn't the cabinet or the drain that woke me. It was the smell of hot iron and aloe, like someone striking a match in an old clinic. Not a breach, a visit. Khumalo was already in the hall, jacket thrown over her shoulders the way some people put on scents. "Bright room," she said. "No hurry. Bring your jaw and leave your pride." We positioned quietly, the way you set the table for a relative who never stays long. Bowl, ground line, flat under Thondi's palm, milk coin on the hinge. The rescission letter lay open on the table where we'd left it to cool. Kwanda took the right of me, hands open. Last, not first. I warned my mouth. Ink only, 2 counts, and let my fingertips hover above the signature loop that had cost Dubé a decade. The ink brightened like something looking up and then settled. I pulled the smallest picture a person can pull. 1, 2, stop. It wasn't words. It was the feel of a hand that had taught wires not to burn. Callus at the pad where iron lives. Patience in the grip. The memory of a knot tied inward and not brought to mouth. I wasn't listening to a ghost. I was reading work left inside paper. Kwanda's forearm thread brightened and cooled. He didn't lean in. He let the room decide it was done. "Copy," he breathed, and it landed like a thank you between people who weren't speaking to each other in sentences. When we stepped back, the ledger wrote a single quiet line. Echo taut. Tie outward to inward. Wet reed before iron. Practical. Like a list a father leaves on the fridge. We paid small debts as if they were rent. Yard crumbs at the fence for the tokoloshe. Tamper paint on the last stubborn pull. A ring chalked under the music block end cap because end caps go to church for attention. Jonas slid felt under a panel and didn't say he'd always wanted to. Lerato kept her shoulders square and her right hand visible and asked Nayidu where the door lipstock lived. He sent her for the heavy box. She carried it with her chin up. Hi. Town arrived late morning with clipboards and cool shoes. The council clerk took notes like they might turn into a song if he looked away, and the safety chair asked what we planned to do about the cultural loss of a choir. You? Replace it with governance, Dondi said. And accounting habit. Dubé stood in front of the stone and read the worst line without flinching. Council lied. School corrected. He didn't apologize to the stone or to us. He apologized to the policy. Then he signed the copy meant for town, and the cutters took a rubbing for the archive like people bottling weather. Khumalo spoke only to the list. 50 days. No singing, bells to wrists. We not at each festival for 7 rain seasons. Sun last, witness small. That's the charter until the river says otherwise. If you want spectacle, go home and hire a stage. The clerk stopped trying to turn notes into song. The day unspooled into useful repetition. Naledi led chalk squads, fat letters on end caps and vents. Calypso-sized cuffs, wrote names in a neat hand, and sent kids back when they tried to pocket bells. Lerato hung a poster that said, "Ear not string" inside the music panel, and another that said, "No songs D49 where the choir list used to go." A boy from Water asked if drumming counted and then looked at his own feet and said, "Off the ground, I know," and fetched the stools himself. By afternoon, the ridge grew a bruise under the skin. Whether thinking about its life choices, drones looped high with streamers unhelpfully calm. We checked the Weenot run. It lay under its stripe like a tendon. The flag cleat seam looked bored. That was our prize. We took our chairs to our doorways early. Evenings are kinder when everyone pretends to be furniture. Kwanda came to my frame and set his palm on the wood once. He smelled like hinge milk and warm metal. The quiet between us had weight. He did not step over it, neither did I. "You read his work," he said. "I read what his hands left behind," I said. "Not a voice, a habit." "That's more useful," he said, and something in his shoulders let go of a knot I'd never seen. "Copy received," I said, because I don't know how to be tender without hiding in procedure. He laughed under his breath for real and stayed where he was. The rule was an animal we didn't poke. The wanting didn't go anywhere. It learned to sit. Night traded in small temptations. A harmony tried itself under the laundry eaves. 2 notes, then memory took back the third. A girl in moon traced not a mouth on the hose cupboard with her fingertip, and then wiped it off with her sleeve so the chalk would have to be renewed in the morning. Boosie would appreciate the perversity of that when she saw it. Near midnight, we found the last admirer we'd missed. A boy in sun rehearsing bravery in front of the admin pool. His right index finger wore a shine of glue, but his wrists wore bells and his shoulders wore gilt. Don't, Caletso said, quiet and even, as if he'd been assigned to guard a friend from ambition. The boy walked away. We added right index to the workshop roster and wrote posters straight next to his name so he could suffer in dignity. The ledger counted down by 1 in its own time. D48. It added a note for the morning. Teach wet reed around iron. We wrote it on the board where anyone could trip over it. And because story has its own hunger, the river sent one last proof before bed. A slow bubble rose in the spillway mouth and spelled thanks in the way water writes to people who stop trying to impress it. 2 ripples and a slackening. We did not bow. We set a coin of milk on the hinge and went home. The next day went to muscle memory. Door lips, drain grids, bell wrists, chalk. Lorato took grit to an ugly weld and didn't complain. Jonas measured felt without humming. Naidu ticked boxes and scowled like a man who'd learned to enjoy being obeyed. The cutters came back with a tin of wax and taught Boosie how to dress the stone for rain. She listened as if it were a recipe that could save a child. By evening, the stone felt older than a day. Students began to take the long way past it for luck. One boy in water touched the blank margin and whispered, small mouth, as if he were begging his own jaw to behave. That's culture change, when policy becomes a superstition that works. Khumalo called a short assembly on the quad and made it shorter by refusing speeches. We keep counting, she said. We keep the wall boring. We bring the we not to every festival like a potluck. We will not prove love by opening. If you're bored, you're doing it right. Then she looked at me. And if you catch your witness trying to be interesting, fetch a bell. Copy, the crowd said, some without smiling. We broke. The ridge held its weather in a fist and decided not to throw it. The rails stayed quiet. The drones blinked green. We took our chairs to the thresholds. Kwanda came to my frame again. The one touch on the wood went where it always went, as if the house had learned the shape of his hand. He didn't spend a second. He stood there until the quiet stopped being a test and turned into a place to stand. 48, he said. We'll make it a habit before it's a number, I said. He tilted his head, thoughtful. You were never not meant, he said, eyes on the hall, not my face. You were meant for this. Small mouth, exact hands. I could have reached for him. I could have wasted what we had on a moment we hadn't earned. I put my palm flat on the frame, an inch from his, and let the heat work through wood instead. Rule holds, I said, my throat not as steady as I wanted. Rule holds, he answered. We slept facing the hall. Somewhere under paint, the echo slept where we asked it to. Somewhere inside iron, a knot decided to be we again. The stone didn't speak. It remembered. And just before I went under, I felt the smallest brush of aloe and hot iron along my jaw, like a hand that was careful because it knew its strength. Not a voice, a habit, telling me, wet reed before iron, outward tied to inward, last, not first, a list I could live with. Morning brought wind off the ridge and a sweetness like boiled milk. D47. The stone had taken on the color of a healed bruise. The grooves drank shadow even when the sun was careless. I walked the anchors with chalk in my pocket and a cup of hinge milk warm against my palm. Hands learn by repeating themselves. So do buildings. A woman from town crossed the quad with a scarf tied tight and grief tied tighter. She stopped at the stone and let one ululation lift, thin and sharp as a wire. It found the groove that said sun last and tried to nest there. Thandi was already turning the air flat. I set a coin of milk on the nearest hinge. Kwanda stepped up beside me, last, not first, hands open. The sound died without humiliation. "I want him to hear me," the woman said. There were 4 decades in her voice, and all of them were tired. "He heard," I said, small mouth. "We speak here without singing." I pointed at the letters. She read with 2 fingers, slower than pride would allow. When her lips reached, "We will not prove love by opening," they trembled and then found stillness. She pressed her forehead to the unlettered margin, not the carved lines, and the quad learned another way a person can behave and still be whole. We kept teaching. Jonas showed a circle of suns and moons how to line the iron with wet reed. Soak, wrap, count 3, pull slow. "Wet reed before iron," I said out loud, so the habit would settle in hands, not mouths. The kids watched my fingers and not my face. Good. Lerato took the poster template I drafted and scrubbed my crooked lines straight. When she pinned it up inside the music block case, ear, not string, she nodded once, as if she had managed to stay herself without worshipping the wrong thing. The council clerk returned with a man who liked decisions more than people. He eyed the stone. "It says council lied," he observed, like a man pointing out rain. It does," Khumalo said without apology. "And school corrected. He asked for ceremony. She gave him process. 50 days, bell wrists, drones and chalk. We knot each festival for 7 rain seasons. Sun last, witness small." He tried to turn it into a speech. Thandi countered with a timetable and the way to a spare chair. He sat. In the bright room, we prepared one more echo lesson because work breeds work. Bowl grounded, lime stripe checked, cabinet braced, smoke tin cracked only enough to be a reminder, not an invitation. Duba's rescission page lay on the table. Under it, the old work order with designate printed where rumor had pretended to be biography. And outside, ink only. 2. I warned my jaw. My fingertips hovered above the loop his hand had left decades ago. 1, 2. Stop. The page gave back practical ghosts, the slope of a Z like a shoulder-bearing weight. A habit of tying outward to inward, not the other way round. An old trick of breathing through heat. In for 3, hold for 2, out for 4, that keeps fuse from turning into fuse box. It wasn't language. It was hands talking to hands across time. Copy, Kwanda said, and his voice had the quiet of someone whose throat had learned a better job. The thread under his skin brightened and cooled. He didn't look at me. He looked at the loop as if it were a knot on a halyard and not a story about him. The ledger wrote a line that was almost fond. Echo yielded technique. No call. Evenings were kinder now. People invented their own rituals around the stone. Touch the blank edge before exams. Whisper the litany into jacket cuffs. Tap a bell strap twice and then not again. When a pair of seniors drifted too close to glow under the big fig, Caletzo raised one eyebrow and held out the cuffs. They tied their wrists and walked it off, dignity intact. This is how culture shifts. Not with banners, with eyebrows and borrowed straps. D46 came in with blue gum light and a wind that thought about sharpening. The ridge put a shoulder against it. We checked the we not run. It lay like a tendon under its lime stripe. Nandi 1 hovered with its streamer slack. Nandi 2 traced the gate and found nothing worth gossiping about. At the chapel ramp lip, a boy from water practiced elbows out past not a mouth and said the litany in a voice meant only for himself. The room listened and behaved. The last admirer, our right index glue sheen, turned out to be a kid who loved posters more than anything. We found his stash, Rulers aligned like ribs, glue capped tight, a level bubble that would shame a mason. He had polished the pull not for sabotage, but because crooked screws make some people itchy. Use that itch, Nayadu told him. Put it on doors that need ugly lips and notices that need to stay up in wind. You touch a pull again without a ring on the floor. I give you knitting and a chair. The boy saluted with the level. We added his name to poster straight and paid him with responsibility, which is the best kind of wage for hands that want to tidy the world. On D45, a teacher from town arrived with a tin of biscuits and the question we knew we owed. Will there ever be a choir again? Yes, Thandi said. When the 50 ends, when the river says enough and the walls remember their job. We'll start with lullabies in the courtyard at lunch and end with a concert next winter. Off the ground, bells on wrists for fun, not policy. The teacher nodded and left the tin, and 3 first years wrote lullaby. Later on the corner of the board like a promise to their future throats. That night, the ridge burned a line of lightning far away. The rails held their breath and exhaled like good lungs. The wee knot hummed once under my palm, and then decided, again, to be rope. The spillway gave us a small ripple that tasted like approval and bedtime. And still, because story counts us when we sleep, Khumalo woke us on D44 without raising her voice. One last audit before the town meeting, she said. Not for drama, for receipts. Nah, we walked our loop. Registry, laundry, chapel, admin, bright room. As if we were reading a favorite book for the first time. In laundry, the grid bolts were warm to the touch and honest. In chapel, the candle under reset morning still had its wax clean as bone. In admin, the pull cover wore tamper paint like lipstick that refused to smudge. In the bright room, lime sat on the wall like a well-fitted shirt. The cabinet slept like a dog who has learned to trust again. The ledger wrote all anchors steady and then smaller. Town at 15 o'clock, bring chair. Town came with folded arms and curiosity. Dubé stood next to the stone and read the hard line a second time. Council lied. School corrected. He didn't try to explain. He signed the municipal copy and handed it to the clerk. Khumalo read the charter she'd built from the river's terms. Houses as custodians, drones as wardens, ledgers as witnesses. We not write each festival, sun last, witness small, no songs for the remainder of the count. No applause, just nods, the good kind, where people accept a thing into their bones because they're tired of the other way. A hand shot up from the back. One of those men who are always offended on behalf of tradition. And if there's an emergency, he asked, if my child is trapped, and the only way, then we still don't open to prove love, Khumalo said. We move iron in baskets. We lay wee knots. We call houses, not doors. We save your child with work, not worship. He went quiet because work is hard to argue with when you don't intend to do any yourself. We broke with tasks instead of a hymn. Naidu fitted caps to the stone's anchor rods. Busi taught a class how to wax letters against rain. Lerato rearranged the music room so chairs faced windows and not the panel. Jonas fixed a squeak in the gym bleacher and put a felt badge on it that said, not a song. Someone, no one claimed it, left a bar of sunlight soap at the bell wrist's table with a note that read, for purple thumbs. Calypso laughed once, and the laugh stayed in the room like cinnamon. When night came, the school settled into a shape that made sense. A place for children, a place for work, a place for myth to pay its rent in small coins. I stood in my doorway with chalk in my pocket and milk on my sleeve and the taste of hot iron still in my jaw like a lesson I meant to keep. Kwanda came and set his palm on the frame. The one touch, always the one. His skin warmed the wood warmed mine. We didn't step over, we stood. 44, he said. We'll get bored before we get there, I said. We already are, he said, and this time the smile reached his eyes. It did something unhelpful to my chest and something very helpful to the building. Rule holds, I said. Rule holds, he said. We slept facing the hall. The stone remembered without help. The rails kept their breath. The river dreamed through concrete with her front door shut. And far under the lime, a knot that used to be a man kept teaching us his small, exact lessons. Wet reed before iron, outward tied to inward, count with your feet, sun last, witness small, until the count itself felt like prayer. D. 43 woke to oranges on the kitchen windowsill and a wind that couldn't make up its mind. The stone looked older, which is how you know a thing belongs. Children took the long way past it, as if there were weather in those carved grooves, touching the blank margin with the caution of people meeting a sleeping dog. A minibus from town pulled in tight to the gate and sat there, engine ticking. Mothers and uncles stepped down with casseroles and advice. One old man in a hat went straight to the stone and traced sun last with the edge of his nail, testing it like a tooth. He cleared his throat and then remembered and said the litany instead. Plain voice, as if he were telling a clerk his address. No one tried to harmonize. The quiet stayed steady on its feet. We kept our loop, milk on hinges, chalk fat around the chapel ramp cap, drones up and bored. The wee knot lay under its lime stripe like a tendon no one had to show off. By noon, a tiny wether, no bigger than a bee, buzzed under the admin pull cover. Not a trick, not a trap, a memory. Boosie snipped the thinking out of it with inside dust, and the mug ate the sulk. We labeled the bag and moved on. The clerk brought a photographer who wanted to pose students at the stone. Khumalo said no, and handed him a stick of chalk. You can draw not a mouth on that hose cupboard. The story is boring now. He blinked twice and did it. The picture he took was just a cupboard with a rude sentence and a hand that had learned to write it. In the bright room, we tried the echo again, not to ask for a voice, only to learn a hand. The rescission page lay on top of the work order. Bowl grounded, lime quiet, smoke barely there. Outside, ink only, 2, I warned my jaw, and put my fingertips over the loop his palm had once pressed into paper. 1, 2, stop. The page gave us mechanics like a recipe. Wet reed before iron, count 3 on the wrap, breathe through heat, tie outward to inward and leave no tail for a mouth to learn. Nothing romantic, everything useful. The thread along Kwanda's radius brightened and cooled. He exhaled with that new steadiness. Copy received, he said to the ink, and if a man in a story smiled then, it wasn't for us, and it wasn't the kind you spend. Toward evening, a bus from the choir parents' committee arrived and parked under the blue gums. They came armed with petitions and apologies they wanted us to accept for things they hadn't done. Thandi gave them the timetable instead. Counting at assemblies, lullabies after day 50, a winter concert off the ground with bell straps for fun. You could see the paper armor slide off their shoulders and land on the paving with a sound like manners. Someone left a tin of peppermint creams, and 3 first years wrote lullaby later in the corner where students have always hidden their hopes. D42 tested elbows. The wind shifted and the ridge showed its pale leaf undersides, which is the mountain's way of saying, pay attention. 91's streamer dipped and liked the flag cleat less than usual, and 92 fussed at the gate for 5 minutes and then decided to behave. We walked the anchors twice. There are prayers that only look like walking circles. On the quad, a girl from Moon tried to fix the crooked lamination on the summons notice and caught herself polishing the pull screw with the corner of her sleeve. She froze and looked at her hand like it had betrayed her. Lorado stepped in without breathing wrong. Use that itch, she said, and handed the girl a level and a rule. Make posters straight where it matters. Leave mouths alone. The girl nodded and redirected the part of her brain that loves lines. We wrote her name under poster straight, and nobody clapped because it was only sensible. I'd been. We paid the tiny debts that keep rooms from asking for glory. A milk coin at the residence grate. A new stripe of lime at the cleat seam. A fresh knot of mouth scratched on the chapel ramp cap where the letters faded from being touched by the faithful of boredom. At last light, the river sent a message we could feel in our gums. A pressure in the spillway throat that wasn't hunger and wasn't a trick. We took the apron like setting a table. Ring-chalked, bowl-grounded, milk on hinge, chair for a person. The surface lifted into skin and wrote 2 words that made the air square its shoulders. Walk echo. We didn't pretend not to understand. Wrote? Khumalo asked. The water wrote with that careful clerk hand we were getting used to. 7 anchors sunwise. Then, do not open. Then, because rivers love receipts, count while you go. We can carry that, Khumalo said. Tomorrow at dawn. The skin flattened. The drain went back to being a drain. We stood up in our ring and felt tired in the good way, the way you feel when the list fits in your pocket. People say night belongs to myth, but we have made a practice of giving it to work. We checked the wee knot run along the flag cleat and found the chain sweating light, not sound. We called that good. The drones blinked green like saints with better things to do. The stone, our rude, honest block, looked like it had always lived there. A student sat at its base and wrote an essay with her back against "We will not prove love by opening." And if that wasn't a reform of curriculum, I don't know what is. In my doorway, Kwanda came and put his palm on the frame once. That one touch has become a room. Sometimes I think the wood is starting to lean toward his hand. Sometimes I think it's my thinking leaning toward his shoulder. Either way, it holds. Dawn, he said. Walk the echo. 7 anchors, I said. Sun last, witness small, count while we go. He looked relieved in the way men do when a sentence finally becomes a job. We won't open, he said. Not to me, to the house. We don't need to, I said. He taught us what hands can learn. He didn't step closer. I didn't. The want stood with us and behaved. Rule holds, I said. Rule holds, he said. We slept facing the hall. Milk dried white on hinges. The ledger wrote D, 41, and beneath it, dawn. Walk echo count aloud, we not stands, no second touches. A breeze came through the corridor and fluttered the no songs notice tacked inside the music block panel, and for once the paper let itself be still. The night did try one more small test, because that is how nights end. The Tokoloshe stole the vet coke wrapper from the yard brick, dragged it through the fence, and left 3 pebbles in exchange. A joke or rent. Sipho laughed and chalked, "Thank you," on the brick. We pay in crumbs, he said, and the pipe stayed quiet. The sky broke clean at the edge when morning arrived. We laid the route like a rights map. Flag cleat, north rail, east stairhead, chapel ramp lip, gate hinge, residence B grate, bright room skirting, bells tied to wrists, no drums, no song, Thandi's flat like a held breath, Boosie's lime like a bandage, Sipho's milk like law, my mouth cheap and small, Kwanda last, his hand open a handspan from sound. We lifted the echo without opening anything. That is the trick we have taught ourselves. It is like helping someone carry a wardrobe when you promise not to move the door. You take the weight that wants to make a mouth and you walk it where it belongs. We counted, steady as the ledger's pulse. 1 at the cleat, 2 at the rail, 3 at the stairhead. The echo tried for rhythm at 4. Thandi refused. 5 at the ramp lip, with a first-year stepping aside as if it were a trolley. 6 at the gate hinge. 7 at the grate. At 8, we were at the bright room skirting and the lime there smelled like restraint. Again sunwise, Khumalo said. We did it again. The echo settled into the wee knot where it crossed outward to inward, like a parcel on the right shelf. It did not lick at anyone's jaw. It did not test Kwanda's wrist for a first touch. It learned, because we gave it a path where learning was easier than rebellion. At the spillway apron, we chalked the ring and put the bowl down and poured milk at the hinges and did not ask for applause. The river skin lifted enough to write good, and then again tonight, we nodded and cleaned our chalk. By the time the sun got over itself, town had read the new habit in our feet. People stopped thinking about the part where a man once carried alone and started thinking about where they stood in the circle. That is also a kind of rescue. Yeah. When the day loosened its belt, I passed the stone and touched the blank margin. It was warm from being useful. A group of first years recited the litany without looking at the letters, like a password they were done forgetting. Kwanda came to my frame and set his palm on the wood. We stood in the polite ache of what we were choosing. The air between us felt like a good harness, not a refusal, a tool. Tonight again, he said. Sun last, I said. Witness small. He tipped his head toward the bright room where the cabinet slept and the wall remembered to be paint. He taught us enough, he said, and for the first time it sounded like a closing prayer and not a wound. Copy, I said. It is my bad habit and my blessing. He smiled without letting it be an event. Rule holds, he said. Rule holds, I answered. The ridge turned its leaves back to green. The drones blinked readiness instead of heroism. The stone kept on remembering. And in the hum of a campus that had learned boredom as a craft, you could taste it. A crossing coming. A crossing we would refuse to make as door openers and insist on making as carriers. We had the root, we had the count, we had the we knot where outward ties to inward and stays. That would be enough, or we would make it enough. Night waited at the edge like a job. Dusk came in with the weird calm that means the ridge has decided to be polite, and the river hasn't. We set the route again without speeches. Flag cleat, north rail, east stairhead, chapel ramp lip, gate hinge, residence B grate, bright room skirting, bells to wrists, no drums touching earth. Thondi's flat held like a sheet, Boosie's lime waiting on the trowel, Sipho's milk warm against his palm. I kept my mouth cheap. Kwanda took his place to my right, an open hand and the promise to be last. We lifted the echo the way you lift a sleeping child you've promised not to wake. 1 at the cleat, 2 at the rail, 3 at the stairhead. At the chapel ramp lip, someone's aunt forgot herself and let a half phrase rise. It touched the letters not a mouth and lost interest. 5 at the lip, 6 at the gate, 7 at the grate. Again, sunwise. The echo went from eager to obedient. You could feel it find the outward to inward cross brace we tied into the wee knot and sit there like a parcel on a correct shelf. On the 3rd loop, the air tried a trick. A gust came down the ridge with a curl in it, the kind that makes gutters sing if you let them, and pushed the echo toward where I was standing. It wasn't a hand. It was the idea of a hand. My jaw warmed on its own, greedy for a second count. In the same breath, Kwanda's palm found the frame of my hip and steadied me. 1 touch, nothing else. Everything else wanted. He removed his hand before the wanting could learn our names. We kept counting. The echo sat down and behaved. Back on the apron, the river lifted a curtain of skin and wrote good and then enough. We didn't bow. We did a sweep. Bruised the chalk with lime, milk at hinges, bowl down, ledger line. Walked, night, no openings, count holds. We ate bread too fast and laughed at nothing. That's how safety sounds when it remembers it almost wasn't. That's it. In the bright room, the rescission page lay where we'd left it, and the work order under it behaved like paper instead of an old habit itching to be a mouth. I sat on a stool, elbows on knees, the way you sit when you don't trust your own weight. Kwanda leaned in the doorway. 1 shoulder and the quiet of a man whose body has learned to conserve. You almost spent it, he said. Almost, I said. I like the way ink feels when it thinks it's helpful. You like lists, he corrected, kind. That's different from liking answers. Copy, I said, because I'm a cliché that way. He smiled and didn't make it an event. He looked past me at the cabinet, lime stripe clean as a scar that's decided to heal. When I was a kid, he said, my father taught me how to breathe through heat. In for 3, hold for 2, out for 4. He said the first time he held the loop he counted in numbers because he didn't trust words near the wall. I thought it was boring. Now I think it was love. I didn't say I was sorry. That would have been a posture, not a use. I read his hands, I said. They were very boring. Thank God, he said softly. Outside, someone dropped a bell strap and apologized to the air. Naletti's voice drifted through the corridor, counting, not scolding. The school was learning to parent itself. We kept our chairs in our doorways because thresholds have become the only place we let our feelings sit. When he put his palm on my frame that night, I matched it with mine. An inch of wood between. Breath shared. No second touches. The wanting settled like a well-trained dog. It wasn't refusal. It was furniture. And D40 started with a cold front that didn't commit. The stone had darkened another shade in the grooves and felt even older under the fingers. Children had begun a secret game of touching the blank margin before tests and walking away without looking back. A superstition that worked. My favorite kind. Town sent a woman with a basket of muffins and the kind of grief that eats sleep. She put the basket on the bell-wrist's table and stood a long time reading the stone with her lips. When she reached, "We will not prove love by opening," she nodded as if she'd found a chair and sat down without sitting. She didn't ask for a miracle. She asked for repetition. We can afford that. The clerk returned with a form to formalize the no choir interval. Thandi took his pen and wrote count D50 at the top and then underneath D40 in a box. "We are not forbidding, we are building," she told him. "When it's over, we sing lullabies and we keep the panels honest." He believed her because she looked like a timetable, not a priest. We took the Echo for its morning walk. 7 anchors, sunwise. Count aloud. It went easier than last night, like a machine that finally understood its job and stopped trying to be art. At the bright room skirting the lime smelled like boiled milk and old iron, which is the smell of a thing that intends to live. The ledger wrote, "Walked, dawn, no song, no second touches." Between loops we did the work that pays the rent on safety. Jonas taught a class how to sew felt baffles without turning the music block into a pillow. Lorado squared the poster corners with a level so precise it made my teeth hurt. Naidu handed me a sheaf of checklists, so dense they looked like lace. I signed them because I like lace when it keeps buildings from trying to have opinions. A boy from Sun, the one with the glue shine index, showed me his new job, poster captain. He had a ruler in one hand and a pride that wanted to grow the wrong way. "Your lines are straight," I said. "Keep them on walls that deserve it." He glowed, but the right kind, not the pear kind. We walked the Echo again at dusk. The ridge pretended to cough and then decided to behave. At the chapel ramp lip, an aunt tried to start a call and response and got as far as, "He carried," before her sister thumped her arm and pointed at the bell on her own wrist. The aunt grinned like a thief caught by a friend and mouthed the rest. On the second circuit, the Echo reached for me again in that way of old jobs that thinks your body will remember the wrong loyalty. I breathed the way the hand had taught me. In for 3, hold for 2, out for 4. It turned out there are fences inside lungs. The Echo respected them. Kwanda didn't have to touch me at all. The river skin gave us good, and then twice tomorrow. We nodded like people being told to carry more chairs to a wedding. Boosie bruised the edge of the ring with lime until even weather would think twice about stepping over. Sifo put a coin of milk on the hinge and rubbed it in the way people rub balm into a scar they've decided not to be ashamed of. Night settled into a domestic shape. The tokoloshe ate crumbs at the yard brick and left a line of 3 pebbles and 1 feather, which Sifo arranged into a face on the step and labeled, "Thank you," in tiny letters. Zizi slept in registry with a spoon tied to his collar, because whoever tied it believed in jokes as policy. The gym bleacher wore a felt patch that said, "Not a song," and looked smug about it. The music block door lip gleamed ugly and safe. D39 arrived with light so clean even the dust tried to behave. We walked, counted, carried, didn't open. The wee knot on the flag run hummed once and then remembered it was rope. The stone kept making ordinary people stop and put their bodies into stillness. A child drew the litany in the dirt with a stick and then scuffed it out with his sneaker as if erasing the words made them more his. By noon, the council clerk brought a woman from the museum, the kind who knows how to pack a clay pot for 4,000 years. She knelt by the stone and showed Boosie how to dress the letters with wax ahead of rain, careful strokes that made grooves drink and faces shed. "You're archivists now," she said. "Every morning is conservation." Boosie nodded as if someone had just given her a new word for the thing her hands have always done. We took the echo at dusk and again by moonlight. Counting steadier, feet surer, wrists quiet. No one tried a note. Even the reeds kept their tongues. At the bright room skirting, I felt the ghost of aloe and hot iron along my jaw. No voice, just instruction. And the instruction this time was stingily practical. Check bolts on drain grids. Milk the chapel hinge again. Don't trust the end cap. We logged it on the board and did it before bed. That should have been the end of the day. It almost was. Then the ridge turned its leaves in one breath, and I could taste rain that had learned a new trick. The ledger wrote D38 before I lay down, and underneath it, the words we had been making ourselves ready for without admitting it. Front building, storm serpent favors east. Walk echo at first thunder. I took my chair to my doorway and sat facing the hall, chalk in my pocket, milk drying on my sleeve, the stone 30 steps away, remembering for all of us. Kwanda came and put his palm on the frame. The wood leaned toward him like it had learned his name. We didn't move. We let the ache sit. "When it breaks, we go," he said. "We go," I said. "We count. We don't open." He looked at the bright room where the cabinet slept and the lime kept its bargain. "He taught us enough," he said again, and this time the words sounded like the edge of a promise and not its center. I almost turned my hand until our fingers could touch through the wood. I didn't. He didn't. The want stayed where we put it and became a kind of strength. "Rule holds," I said. "Rule holds," he said. The first thunder placed a polite knuckle on the rim of the world, and the whole campus, the stone, the rails, the drains, the doors with their ugly lips, sat up like a dog that recognizes a footstep. We stood. It was time to carry what we had promised to carry. The first thunder laid its knuckle on the rim of the world. We moved. Bells to wrists, drones up, Nandi, 1 to the flag run, Nandi 2 to the gate, streamers on, hoppers full, lime buckets lifted, milk jars warm against palms. The route was a sentence our feet already knew. Flag cleat, north rail, east stairhead, chapel ramp lip, gate hinge, residence B grate, bright room skirting. No drums on ground, no singing. Thondi's flat went over the quad like a sheet you throw across a bed when you've decided to live. The wee knot along the flag run sweated a hair of light, not sound. Good, we started at 1. Flag cleat. Boosie bruised the seam with lime. Sifo tipped milk on the pole's foot. I kept my mouth cheap. Kwanda opened his hand. Last, not first, we counted. The echo lifted like heat off tar and nested in rope instead of metal. 2 at the rail. De Klerk tapping with the rubber mallet just once, filings lying down. 3 at the stairhead. Do not grab glaring fat enough to shame fingers. The thunder walked a little closer, trying to find rhythm. Thandi refused to offer it one. At the chapel ramp lip, 5, an aunt on the path remembered a chorus and forgot it again when her bell strap brushed her wrist. She tapped it, grinned at herself, mouthed the litany plain, and stepped back. 6 at the gate hinge, milk coin gleaming like a rule. 7 at the residence B grate. The tokoloshe ducked a respectful inch and stayed out of the mouth. 8 at the bright room skirting, lime smelling like boiled milk and iron, which is the smell of a house saving your life. Again sunwise, the wind curled off the ridge with a cunning in it, the kind that makes gutters pretend to be flutes. Nandi 1's streamer tugged at the flag run and then lay still. The echo rode us instead of the other way round. Weight without teeth, lesson without story. You could feel it recognize the outward to inward cross brace we tied into the wee knot and sit there, parcel shelved correctly at last. 3rd loop, the storm tried a new door. A pressure slid along my jaw, sweet as a bribe. It didn't speak. It offered help. The second count it wanted was right there under my tongue. In the same breath, a palm found the frame of my hip and steadied me. 1 touch, nothing else. Everything else, wanting and behaving. He took his hand back before the wanting could learn a name. I breathed the way the ink had taught us. In for 3, hold for 2, out for 4. The pressure lost interest. We kept counting. Back at the apron, the river raised a strip of skin and wrote good and then again. No applause, no ululation. We did what we always do. Bruise chalk with lime, milk the hinges, bowl down, ground line clipped. The ledger, somewhere under lime, wrote walked. Storm hash 1, no openings, count holds, and turned its page like a clerk warming his hands. The second thunder wasn't polite. It rolled its shoulder through the ridge and laughed in the rail's direction. Impundaloo flashed along the horizon, tasting for song. We met them with policy. Bells silent on wrists, flat under sky, iron tempted toward shut with milk, rope ready for echo. The birds bent away without explanation. Good, a refusal with manners. We took bread too fast. We laughed at nothing, the way people laugh when their bodies agree to keep living. In the bright room, the rescission lay face up. Beneath it, the old work order. Bowl grounded. Cabinet asleep under honest paint. Outside, ink only, too, I warned. Not because we'd need it, because rules are furniture. I pulled the smallest picture from the ink, not a voice, a habit. Wet reed before iron. Count 3 on the wrap. Breathe through heat. Tie outward to inward and leave no tail. Kwanda's forearm thread brightened and cooled. He didn't look at me. He looked at the loop like a knot that had finally been named. Copy received, he said, and the room enjoyed how ordinary that sounded. Yeah. The ridge coughed again. We went. 1 at the cleat, 2 at the rail, 3 at the stairhead, 4 at the lip, 5 at the gate, 6 at the grate, 7 at the skirting. The echo tried to turn on the little step outside admin. Someone had polished that concrete last term and never confessed. But Boosie chalked a ring uglier than dignity, and the idea of a mouth forgot itself. Thandi's flat dropped half a hair, and the gutters remembered they were metal, not throats. On the 4th loop, weather reached for me a second time. It didn't deserve me twice. I gave it numbers like pebbles. 3, 2, 4. The urge drifted off as if bored. Kwanda didn't have to touch me at all. Across the path, a moon boy touched his bell strap and didn't apologize to anyone for how much he liked being right. We brought the echo to the apron and set it down without opening anything. The river's skin lifted and rode enough. And then again at first light. We nodded like people being asked to carry one more bench. Sipho rubbed milk into the hinge as if it were balm. Boosie packed the trowel with the satisfaction of a mechanic putting a good tool to bed. The storm went rummaging around town and threw its weight at a power pole uphill. The campus sat snug in its ugly. We did the domestic things that are our sacrament. door lips checked, drain grids warmed tight, music block felt settled, not a mouth on every end cap the weather admired. Jonas stitched another baffle like a man earning back his name inch by inch. Lerato drew a straight line no one would notice and felt it click into the day like a vertebrae. Night pressed its face to the windows and tried to find its reflection. It found none, only chalk and milk and flat and the smell of iron worn honest. In my doorway, we took our chairs because thresholds are where feelings live safely. He placed his palm on the wood once. I matched it on my side of the grain. We let the ache be furniture. You didn't need me that time, he said. I needed the lesson, I said, and we both knew whose hands had left it, and your one touch where it belongs. He almost laughed. The room held it for him until he wanted it back. Morning was a clean tear in the sky. D38 turned to D37 in the ledger with a line that felt like a drumstick on the rim. Walk echo at first light twice, sun last, witness small. We did what we were told to do, which is also what we wanted to do. Bells tied, drones bored, we walked, counted, didn't open. The we not hummed once and then behaved. The rail remembered nothing useful to music. Them. At the chapel ramp, a grandparent in a brown hat stood with his hand on his chest as if his elbow had learned a new prayer. He mouthed the litany while we passed and didn't try to tuck himself into our count. That's a kind of love, too. Between loops, we were teachers again. Naidu made first years name every hinge on their corridor before he let them eat. Name things and they shy away from miracles, he said. A Jimsoon tried to clap a joke. The felt on the bleacher said, not a song in his palm, and he stopped grinning mid-beat because policy can be funny when it's right. On the second pass, weather decided to be clever. A slick gust slid under the music block awning and bent the echo toward the panel. The case, fat with felt and arrogance finally tamed, didn't answer. Lerato, who had anticipated her own worst idea, had taped ear not string inside at eye height. The echo read, it let itself be carried. Back at the apron, the river showed us a rare courtesy. Thanks, written in 2 ripples and a slackening. It added D37 in a wobble that could have been coincidence if we were still living by coincidence. We weren't. We ate, we checked, we wrote. The board carried a day that any lazy god would call boring. Walked echo, dawn X2, dusk X1. No openings, no songs. Sun last, witness small. We not quiet, rails quiet, stone dressed. Milk coins on hinges, lime stripes on seams, end caps shamed. Under it in Khumalo's hand. If it tries story, give it receipt. Afternoon brought a cold shadow that thought about being a squall. We did not wait for it to make up its mind. We counted preemptively, 1, 2, 3, until the campus learned to expect our numbers the way a house learns a family's footsteps. The storm decided to be someone else's problem. At dusk, the stone was the color of a responsibility you've had long enough to stop resenting. A water boy stood with his back to it, reading without turning around. He carried, we eat our part now. He said it under his breath like a locker combination and walked away taller. And that night, I don't know if it was mercy or momentum. The ridge held its leaves flat and the gutters stayed stupid. We still took our chairs. He still put his palm to the frame. I still matched it. No second touches. The want kept training. We're getting good at this, he said. We're getting boring, I said, and made it praise. He tipped his chin toward the bright room. The next time I call to him will be at the spillway, he said. Echo only, not for me, for we. For a second, the ache tried to be a door. We told it no with our hands on wood. Copy, I said. Rule holds, he answered. We slept facing the hall. The ledger wrote D36, and then, underneath with a little swagger it had not earned the right to show, and somehow had anyway. System holds under storm. Prepare town drill. The river, front door shut, bills filed, dreamed through concrete like a frugal ant. The we-not kept its own counsel. The stone remembered. And in the rooms between our rooms, the lesson we keep reading wrote itself again. Outward tied to inward. Wet reed before iron. Count with your feet. Sun last, witness small, not a mouth.